She's coming now with the hours.
Anybody else need a seat? Okay, hello, good evening everyone. Very well behaved. Just want to say hello and welcome to Book a Bookshop. It's lovely to see such a full house for the launch of Julie Leoni's book Into the Woods, illustrated by Anita Wyatt, edited by Kate Taylor, who's sitting beside her. Today is International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. So it seems a significant and appropriate day to be launching Julie's book. It's a book that takes stories of modern day abuse, codependence and domestic violence and retells them as classic fairy tales. And I know Julie is going to tell you a bit more about that. Just want to say that Julie is a long-standing and hugely supportive advocate of Book a Bookshop. So it's a real great pleasure to have her here tonight telling us about her book, and it's also lovely that you come out in support of that. So I think it's time to find out more about the book, how and why it came to be. So help me give a really warm welcome to Julie.
Thank you. I am just going to start with thank you. So thank you everybody. Obviously lots of you are friends either of me or Anita or Kate. So I really appreciate it, although it is quite weird talking to people that know you quite well. Thank you to Booker, Carrie, for having us, because this feels like home. This is one of the shops in the village that actually works. It's here, Sports Direct, are the two places they most want to come to, so I'm really happy with that. Kate and Anita, Kate was introduced to me by Emily Bell, who will arrive late and we'll stare at her. But Kate's worked on this book for free. She's got 20 years in publishing, she's edited abroad and everything, but she really believed in this book and believed in me, and I can't tell you how much that's really meant. And Anita, some of you know, Anita and I worked together, and I thought, oh, she's never going to do the illustrations because she's a proper artist. But foolishly she said yes, and then she's only had the summer to do the pictures in, so please come and look at the pictures. They're just stunning. Montgomery Family Crisis Centre are over in the corner, and we're raising money for them tonight, so all the profits from the books will go to Montgomery Family Crisis Centre. And there's also some proof copies of Anita's artwork. That please, if you have spare cash, we're thinking that at least a tenner for each thing, all money will just go straight to them to raise money for the charity, because that's what the point of this book is really. Terry, Hannah, thank you very much for all your support, all of you being here, and thank you for you. So, why this? Why today? So today is the United Nations Day for the ending to violence against women and girls. And we all are used to wearing our kind of ribbons for breast cancer research, but I've seen 2 white ribbons, and that's on Montgomery first Charmin colleague over there, and it's just one of those days that people don't really talk about, and it's to start 16 days of activism to get people thinking about and talking about what that means in their communities. So I just wanted to start off with putting why I wrote the book into a kind of political and social context, and then I'll kind of bring it home a bit more to me. So, and I've printed it off really big. There's not loads of pages, it's just really big, so I'm trying, don't have to wear my glasses too much, is the idea. So, the Office for National Statistics say that 1 in 4 women in their lifetime will experience domestic abuse. So looking around this room, which is predominantly women, think about what that means for the women in your life, for the daughters, for the sisters, for the nieces and nephews, the children we teach. 1 in 4 in their lifetime. And for me that's shocking and it's not spoken about, and that makes me cross. 2 women a week are killed by their partner. I was on Shropshire Radio this morning and was on just before a vicar who said, oh my God, we were one of those parishes where one of our parishioners was killed by our partner, and we're doing a lot on domestic abuse. So it's happening right here on our doorstep. Men, of course, are affected by this, and I'm so pleased to see some men here. There's been lots of men I know have got really nervous about coming. This isn't about thinking that all men are bad. It's just that actually I only had the experience of listening to women's stories. There certainly are men's stories to be told. It's just that I wasn't in a position to tell those stories. 30 men in the year 1916 to 1917 were killed by their partners, and 82 women. So for every 3 victims of domestic abuse, 1 is a man, 2 are women. And then some statistics about children, how this affects children. So one of my kind of things that makes me cross is that we all, there's lots of teachers in this room, we talk about child protection, lots of us are child protection trained, but we don't make the link between domestic abuse and the effects that that has on the children. So actually 39,000 babies under 1 year old were living with domestic abuse last year. Think about the long-term effect that that's going to have on those people. 19 children and 12 families were killed by violent fathers, and around 1 in 5 children are living with domestic abuse right now. So that's why this book really matters. And if I've got a vision for this book, I'm not making any money from this. I will cover my costs. But after that, what I really want for this book is to go out and educate people, inspire people to start those conversations so that people living in those relationships don't have to and don't feel so isolated. And I'll share with you a bit about what I've learned from the process of the book. So why did I write the book? Well, I've had an abusive relationship, and when I came out of that, I couldn't find stories of real women. Someone sent me a YouTube clip, and there was an American woman talking about her husband who'd held a gun to her head. And although I remember crying watching it, but I couldn't connect to it because my experience wasn't guns. Kind of the whole American thing didn't sit with me. And I Googled, and there's lots of books about things like domestic abuse and codependence and narcissism, which I'll talk a bit more later. But actually there were no books of women telling their stories, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to feel that I wasn't alone, and it just wasn't there. And I felt so stupid. I've got letters after my name, I've got more qualifications than anyone needs. And I couldn't believe that had I got caught up in this, why'd I fallen for it? I needed to understand it. I needed to understand it to kind of make meaning of it. And I was obviously felt really ashamed. I judged myself, I felt stupid, I felt like I should have known, me of all people. I was going around the country at that time talking about emotional literacy to big audiences. So I, of all people, should have known better, was the voice that I had in my head, should have known better. But I was really lucky. I got support from Montgomery Family Crisis Centre and the Freedom Programme, and I could afford to pay a counsellor, and I did the work. And sitting in the Freedom Programme, if anyone's ever heard, this is Emily Bell! I feel like Leoni just right through. You were the link that made it happen. Right. Okay. So the Freedom Programme, if you've never come across it, we should all know about the Freedom Programme. It's this thing that you do after you've come out of an abusive relationship, but it's so amazing. It's a really simple picture of what the dominator is, and it talks about behaviours like lying, bullying, shouting, controlling financially. And it was kind of like someone turning a light on for me. I hadn't experienced all of the things on that picture, but what I did think was this is simple enough to teach kids. Why are we not teaching kids this so that we can say to them, this is how it works, these are the behaviours. Why didn't I know this beforehand? I'm an intelligent woman, how come I didn't know this beforehand? And so I did set up a website, which has had some kind of mileage. I put loads of resources up there, and people were kind of there, but still what I was finding, so obviously I work in a couple of schools and I see people privately for coaching, people still don't talk about it, and the clients that I was listening to are women and girls, and that statistic of 1 in 4 fits with what I was hearing as a coach. And again, I was hearing stories of kids saying to teachers that daddy does this to mummy, and teachers not taking action, or women who didn't have the money to leave or didn't have anywhere to go. And so I suppose I wrote this book because I was pissed off, and because I wanted things to be different, and I would recognise the fact that I was quite fortunate in that we're well supported around here with the charities. There is support around here, but not everybody's in that position. Not everybody can afford to pay a counsellor. And so I wanted to make that difference. So that's why I started it. So this is going to be a presentation of 2 halves, you'll be pleased to know. So you can draw a breath. So we're going to have a question and answer and a kind of break in the middle. And then again at the end. And it's really, I'm just going to take you through the journey of the book to tell you how that came across. So some of you know that I'm a qualitative researcher. My PhD was interviewing naughty boys about why they got excluded, and that was a long time ago, and I can tell you the answer to that another time. But I really like interview. Obviously it fits in with my coaching skills as well. And so I put the word out on social media, and I said I wanted to interview people who'd experienced domestic abuse. I didn't say it had to be women, it's just that that's what came back, because being part of the Freedom Programme and sitting in a room with other women, I'd heard fragments of people's stories, but I, of course, didn't get the full story. And what I wanted was to I needed to understand, what was it? Was it something in our upbringing, or was it something in our personality, or was it how? And then what happened, and why didn't we see it? And why did we stay so long? And why was it so hard to leave? I wanted the answers to those questions. And so I interviewed people, I put the word out. And the interviews were quite lengthy. Some of the women I've still never met. It was all done over Skype, it was done over online platforms. But the interviews lasted kind of a good couple of hours each. And because I was really aware that one of the things about abuse is you're feeling really controlled, was I really didn't want to control the women. So what I did do was send the interview questions out in advance so that they knew about them. They didn't have to answer things that they didn't want to talk about. And after I'd interviewed them, I sent them back a recording of the interview, I sent them back the transcripts, and then I wrote the first draft of the book, which I finished not this summer but last summer, and I sent that out to them. At that point, I had a couple drop out, because what I hadn't thought about that made complete sense was actually you tell someone your story, and it's a really hard story to tell, and the last thing you want to do is read it back. The last thing you want to do is hear it. You don't want to see it in black and white. And so I lost a couple of people there, and then I was looking at a sample in research terms that was way too small for the book that I had in my head that I was writing. It was quite academic-y and references and all that sort of stuff, a bit like my PhD. And so I just kind of left it and moved on. And then Anita said, oh, can you meet my friend Emily? And Emily and I met only in January, wasn't it? It was quite early this year. And she said, well, you really need to talk to Kate, because Kate's no bullshit. And if she doesn't like it, she won't do it. And so then Kate and I actually only met on the 9th of February, which is phenomenal when you think that was that first meeting, the 9th of February. And here we are. And so the deal was that I would make the coffee, and she would do the bullshit. Lunch sometimes, but no bullshit was the exchange. And so I sent her a draft, and she went, who do you want to read this? And I was like, well, everybody. I want it to really change lives. And she was like, it's not that book yet, is it? I was like, oh, okay. And so we had a conversation. I'd used Joseph Campbell, who some of you know, The Hero's Journey, as a kind of structure for the book. And she said, why are you using that? And I said, well, because I really like myth, and I really like fairy story, and it kind of ties in because there's a beginning and a middle, and they have to go into the dark wood and fight off the scary things and come out the other side. And I spoke to her about it, and she said, well, why don't you just write the fairy stories? And it was like, oh yeah, good idea. That's so obvious. And then we got a bit excited about, and we could illustrate it, and we could do it so it looks like a fairy storybook, and so away I went. And do you know, it's just come so easily, that turning things round, because actually fairy stories, of course, historically have been women's stories told by the fireside. They were never cutesy, pink, sparkly things. They were all with blood and gore and danger and sex. Anyone that's read any of Angela Carter's books will know how much sex and blood there is in there. And so it kind of fitted in with the genre. And what I hadn't even thought about before starting that was that actually it means that I can keep the women really anonymous, because part of the problem with writing and talking about domestic abuse is that fear of what the perpetrator is going to do remains with you. That's why it's so scary. And I'll talk a bit more about post-traumatic stress later on. And so obviously anonymity and confidentiality were crucial. And the fairy tale form allowed me to do that. And so weirdly, I've actually been able to put loads, the stories have got loads of detail in. Some of the dialogue in there is directly taken from the transcripts in a way that I just couldn't have done if it had been any other sort of book. Because I think they're much more truthful. Of course, they're completely made up. You know, there's mermaids and there's bears and all of that you'd expect in fairy tales. But I suppose the other part about fairy tales, which just seem to fit, is that they're archetypal, aren't they? We all know that there's the bad guy and the good guy, and we know how those work. So they kind of transcend the individual, and they speak to us no matter what. And not many people have read the book. I had a few people kind of done forwards for it, and I've had some proofreaders. And what the forward people have said is that actually, even though they may not have had those kind of relationships, there's still something in there for women. There's still something about how we try to please people and how we try to be good girls, and again, I'll come on to that. So it seemed to speak to a wider audience. And having written the first book, which felt like hard work, it felt really difficult to write. The fairy stories have almost, I know it's a cliche, but they've kind of written themselves. It's just been a joy to be with them. They've been very easy to write. So, I can't remember which page I'm on, page 5. I do need my glasses. So, what I'm going to move on to now is what I learnt from the interviews, which I hope comes across in the book. And what I hadn't expected was their fairy stories. And I think one of the reasons women end up in those kind of relationships, and again, I can't speak for men, I don't know, but it was to do with the fairy stories we all carry in our heads as women, I think. Some cultural scripting around being nice girls, being good girls, being the good wife, you know, the stereotype of the good wife, where we're putting everybody else's needs first, where we're looking after everybody, we're endlessly giving, we're endlessly patient. The story of the perfect mother, where we give everything to our children. And then we have the fairy story in our head about the great romance, where we meet Heathcliff. I certainly have that in my head. I'm going to meet Heathcliff, and he'll be dark, and he'll be brooding, and sweep me off my feet, and he'll be really moody, and I will save him, I will heal the wound in him. And that theme ran across all the interviews, which shocked me, because here I am writing fairy stories, and actually fairy stories are kind of what got us into trouble, I think. And I then reflected on, I've got boys, so obviously we do spend a lot of time in here, but we're looking at action books to kill people and there are no equivalent fairy stories about boys. You know, they're all big and strong and feisty, and they're leading the way, and they don't really give two whatsits about anyone else so long as they get the dragon first. And so I began to realise that actually I think one of the reasons that we end up in those kind of relationships is because we still have those stories in our head, and I think they're very powerful. I also think that we believe in the happy ever after. Think of all the songs you've ever heard about standing by your man and love hurting. You know, they're all predisposing us to put up with things, maybe that we wouldn't otherwise put up with. And the films, you know, all the tragic films where love will find a way, no matter how bad it is. I think those things keep us stuck there. There was also, for me, something about and some of the other women about single parenting is a really bad thing. And it's better for children to grow up in a marriage with two parents than to be brought up by a single parent, because that's bad and you have failed. And you don't have to look far from the tabloids to see how single parents, particularly single mothers, are kind of pilloried for anything that's gone wrong. And we don't stop to go, well, hang on, what happened to the bloke? Where was he? So that's my understanding of the broader. Certainly some of the interviews the women were saying, I thought that I had to stay married because divorce is bad, because I got married for life, because I'd made my bed and I had to lie in it, and because that's what we do. So they were some of the themes and stories that were coming out. And then there was something else which kind of came up. In a way, there were two types of childhoods that the women had. One is kind of maybe what you would expect, that they'd had abusive childhoods themselves, but actually it wasn't just abusive, it was critical, having a very critical parent who just put them down, or they were never good enough, which again predisposed them to staying in those kind of relationships where they were being put down or never good enough. So that kind of I was less surprised by, but the one that I was really surprised by, the early childhood experience, were the happy families, the kind of perfect families. And so there were a few women there who had parents who seemed to have this idyllic marriage where there was never any arguments, where they just seemed to be completely in love with each other. And from the outside, because my parents divorced, so I'd always dreamed of, oh, if I had a happy family where nobody ever argued. But actually it turns out that's not great either, because what they weren't getting were any models for healthy conflict. They had no compass for less nice things. They hadn't had any resilience for spotting a bad un and stepping away. They had come from this kind of Pollyanna, very sugary, lovely, lovely upbringings, and then just didn't know what they were like, thought everyone was like that, had no compass for it. And that surprised me. That isn't what I expected to find. So I am going to take a moment and I'm going to read to you from the book with my post-it notes. I was just saying over there that I kind of haven't given my kids a copy of the book yet, and I was flicking, one of my younger sons picked up the book, flicked through it and found one of the there's sex bits in it, and he picked up randomly one of the sex bits and went, Mum, why are you writing about that for? This is not a sex bit. But this is the story of Rapunzel. Where is Rapunzel? Where's Rapunzel? Ah. Where is Rapunzel? She's come with her. Where's Rapunzel?
Wait. I don't think Rapunzel came. Rapunzel didn't come today. She was too big for her frame.
Is that really?
She was still awkward.
So there's a beautiful picture of Rapunzel, and when Anita, so the way this worked with Anita is I go, this is the picture I've got in my head, and then somehow Anita could psychically see that and do it. So she is a bit of a witch to say. Talking of fairy stories like that. So careful how you talk to her, because she can see into your head. And so I said for Rapunzel, so the character of Rapunzel was brought up in a family where boys did what they liked and girls looked after them. And so the picture that there is of Rapunzel is of a girl with Rapunzel-like hair being pulled in every direction. And so this is a bit from her story. So she's been brought up in this family where everybody's putting on her and nice girls look after everybody else. One day her prince came to rescue her from the claws of commercialism and Catholicism, swarthy and exotic, a man from a foreign land, such a catch, such a sign of how desirable she was to have a handsome and powerful man interested in her, and surely proof to herself and the world that she was, after all, worth something. Look what I can get, she thought. It was a big deal to enchant a prince from another land. He was so charming, Prince Charming, so seductive, so alluring, and well, so manly and strong and brooding. How could she resist? Her parents were horrified. He's a communist, and he doesn't believe in God, her mother wailed, biting her tongue to stop herself from adding, and he's a foreigner. They had raised Rapunzel to marry a good Catholic emerald man, and in return raise a huge Catholic brood. They were distraught and bereft. Slightly smug, Rapunzel shrugged her lily-white shoulders, shook her scarlet hair, and laughed at their parochial, narrow-minded ways, before heading off into the sunset with her Prince Charming, who showed her his huge, long, strong, erect tower and told her to make herself at home. He was so interesting and had such a good job. All the women loved him. She'd only find out later just how much. And all the men wanted to be his friend. He was a man of influence and stature. Of course she married him. For to have amazing sex out of wedlock was a sin, she knew. They wined and dined, and she listened to him regale his captured audience with all his tales. His stature was so huge that in his shade she withered away, getting smaller and smaller, finding it harder and harder to leave their ebony tower. He would dominate their dinner parties, and she would hardly speak. People envied how happy